Jack Razor Morrison never planned on being anybody's savior. At 58, the grizzled Hell's Angels rider had spent decades running from his demons, finding solace only in the rumble of his Harley and the bottom of whiskey bottles. When he spotted 3 kids rummaging through garbage behind Murphy's gas station on a freezing October night, every survival instinct told him to keep riding. Instead, he pulled over. The children were filthy, scared, and clearly hadn't eaten in days. 8-year-old Maya clutched her younger brothers protectively, while 10-year-old Tommy tried to look tough despite shivering in a torn jacket. 6-year-old Louis just stared with hollow eyes that had seen too much. "You kids got somewhere to go?" Razor asked, knowing the answer. They didn't, so he did something that surprised even himself. He took them home. But what happens when kindness puts you in the crosshairs of killers? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ride back to Razor's trailer took 20 minutes through the empty desert roads outside Bakersfield. Maya sat behind him on the Harley, her small arms wrapped tight around his leather vest, while Tommy and Luis squeezed into the sidecar he'd welded to his bike years ago for hauling supplies. None of the kids spoke during the journey, but he could feel Maya trembling against his back. His home wasn't much to look at. A beat-up Airstream trailer parked on 5 acres of scrubland he'd bought with cash 15 years ago. No neighbors for miles, which was exactly how he liked it. The place suited a man who'd spent the last 2 decades avoiding human contact whenever possible. Razor cut the engine and helped the children down. Up close, under the porch light, they looked even worse than he'd first thought. Their clothes were expensive once, designer jeans, name-brand sneakers, but now they were torn and filthy. Maya's hair was matted with dirt and grease. Tommy's jacket had a hole in the elbow that looked fresh, and little Luis's shoes were held together with duct tape. "You hungry?" Razor asked, though the answer was obvious from their hollow cheeks and the way Tommy kept eyeing the trailer like he was afraid it might disappear. All 3 nodded silently. Inside, the trailer was clean but sparse. A fold-out table, a small kitchenette, and a bed in the back. Military surplus gear hung from hooks on the walls, camping equipment, a first aid kit, and beneath his leather vest, something the kids couldn't see, a set of dog tags that read Morrison, Jack A, with a Marine Corps emblem. Razor rummaged through his cabinets, finding a can of beef stew and some crackers. As he heated the food on his small gas stove, he noticed Maya clutching something in her pocket. When she thought he wasn't looking, she pulled out a crumpled photograph and smoothed it carefully before tucking it away again. "What's your names?" he asked as he ladled stew into 3 mismatched bowls. "I'm Maya," the girl said quietly. "This is Tommy and Luis." She spoke with the careful politeness of a child who'd been well raised before whatever nightmare had landed them on the streets. "How long you been out there?" Maya and Tommy exchanged a look. 2 weeks, Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. Razor set the bowls on the table and watched them eat. They devoured the food like they hadn't seen a meal in days, which they probably hadn't. Luis ate so fast he started choking, and Maya rubbed his back until he could breathe again. "Where's your folks?" The question made Maya's eyes fill with tears. She shook her head and looked down at her bowl. "They're gone," Tommy said fiercely, as if daring Razor to ask for details. Razor had seen enough broken kids in his life to recognize trauma when he saw it. Whatever had happened to their parents, it was recent and violent. The children had that shell-shocked look he remembered from his own face, in mirrors after combat. After they finished eating, Razor gave them clean towels and showed them how to work the tiny shower in his trailer. Maya went first, then Tommy, while Luis fell asleep sitting up at the table. When it was the youngest boy's turn, Razor noticed something that made him pause. Beneath the grime on Luis's wrist was an expensive-looking watch. A kid's Rolex, the kind that cost more than most people made in a month. That night, Razor gave the kids his bed and slept on the floor with a camping bag. As he lay awake listening to their exhausted breathing, he wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. 3 rich kids don't end up homeless without someone looking for them. And in his experience, when people were looking for kids this hard, it usually wasn't for good reasons. Through the thin trailer walls, he could hear Maya whispering something to her brothers. It sounded like a prayer, but he couldn't make out the words. Whatever these children had been through, they were scared of more than just being hungry and cold. Razor touched the dog tags beneath his shirt and made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, he'd start asking questions. But tonight, 3 kids would sleep safe and warm, maybe for the first time in weeks. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later at Murphy's gas station. Razor had stopped for coffee and cigarettes, while the kids waited in the sidecar. When Murphy himself, a grizzled old-timer who'd been running the station for 30 years, pulled him aside. "Jack, you got a minute?" Murphy's voice carried a tension that put Razor immediately on alert. "What's up, Murph?" "Had some folks come by yesterday asking about kids. 3 of them, they said. 2 boys and a girl." Murphy glanced toward the sidecar, where Maya was quietly entertaining her brothers with a hand game. "Said they were social workers, but they didn't feel right to me." Razor's blood went cold. "What kind of didn't feel right?" "Well, for starters, they were driving a black Escalade with tinted windows. You ever seen a social worker with wheels like that?" Murphy spat tobacco juice into a paper cup. "And the woman, she was asking real specific questions. Not just, have you seen 3 kids, but details. Like she knew exactly who she was looking for. They leave a card or anything?" "Nope, just said they'd be back." Murphy's weathered face creased with concern. "Jack, I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but those weren't government people. I spent 20 years in the service before I opened this place. I know the difference between official business and something else." Razor bought his cigarettes and drove home with his mind racing. Professional hunters. That's what his instincts told him, and his instincts had kept him alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan and 15 years of outlaw life. Someone with serious resources was looking for Maya, Tommy, and Luis. Back at the trailer, he found Maya helping Tommy with what looked like homework on a piece of cardboard. She'd found an old pencil somewhere and was showing him how to do long division. The sight of it, this little girl trying to maintain some normalcy for her brothers, hit him harder than he expected. "Maya, honey, I need to ask you something." She looked up with those 2 serious eyes that belonged on a much older face. "Yes, sir? Before you ended up on the streets, were people looking for you? People who weren't your family?" The pencil slipped from her fingers. Tommy immediately moved closer to his sister. That protective instinct Razor recognized from combat soldiers, watching each other's backs. "I don't know what you mean," Maya said, but her voice shook. "Yes, you do." Razor kept his tone gentle but firm. 3 kids with expensive clothes and watches don't just disappear without someone powerful trying to find them. And now those someones are asking questions around town. Tommy's face went pale. "They found us?" "Not yet, but they're close." Razor pulled a chair over and sat down so he was at their eye level. "I can't help you if I don't know what we're dealing with. Who's looking for you and why?" Maya's hand went to her pocket where she kept that crumpled photograph. After a long moment, she pulled it out and handed it to him. The picture showed the 3 children with a well-dressed couple, their parents obviously, standing in front of what looked like a mansion. Everyone was smiling, dressed for some kind of formal event. "Mom and Dad are dead," Maya whispered. "They died in a car accident 3 weeks ago." Razor studied the photograph. The woman looked like an older version of Maya, elegant and poised. The man had Tommy's stubborn jaw and intelligent eyes. But it was the background that caught his attention. This wasn't just a nice house. It was serious money. After the funeral, we were supposed to go live with Uncle Richard, Tommy continued, his voice getting stronger. But the night before we were supposed to move, Maya heard him on the phone. "What did you hear?" Razor asked Maya gently. "He was talking to someone about making sure we never made it to his house." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He said the accident wasn't really an accident, and that we needed to disappear permanently." The pieces clicked into place in Razor's mind. Rich parents, dead in a suspicious accident. An uncle who didn't want the kids reaching safety. Professional hunters tracking them down. This wasn't about custody or family disputes. This was about money. Serious money. And 3 kids who were standing between someone and a fortune. That night Razor couldn't sleep. He sat on his trailer's front steps, smoking and watching the desert darkness while the kids slept inside. Every sound made him reach for the .45 he kept in his shoulder holster, a coyote's howl, the wind rattling the aluminum siding, a truck, engine somewhere in the distance. Around dawn, he made a decision that went against every survival instinct he'd developed over 2 decades of dangerous living. He was going to ask for help. The Bakersfield chapter of the Hells Angels met at a converted garage on the rough side of town. Razor pulled up to the clubhouse just after 9 in the morning, leaving the kids safely hidden at his trailer with strict instructions not to answer the door for anyone. Bull Martinez, the chapter president, was a mountain of a man, with arms like tree trunks and a beard that reached his chest. He'd been running the Bakersfield Angels for 15 years, and he had a reputation for being smart, ruthless, and absolutely loyal to his brothers. Razor, Bull nodded as Jack walked into the garage. Heard you got yourself some house guests. News traveled fast in a small town, especially when it involved a Hells Angel who'd lived like a hermit for years, suddenly showing up places with 3 kids in tow. Need to talk to you. Bull, private. Bull gestured toward his office, a cluttered room behind the main garage. The walls were covered with Angels memorabilia, photos of rides and runs, and a framed citation from the Marine Corps thanking the chapter for their annual Toys for Tots drive. What's eating you, brother? Razor laid it out straight. The kids, their dead parents, the uncle who wanted them gone, and the professional hunters who were closing in. He left out the details about money. That was the children's secret to share or keep, but he made it clear these weren't ordinary runaways. Bull listened without interrupting, his scarred hands folded on his desk. When Razor finished, the big man was quiet for a long moment. You know what you're asking for, Bull finally said. Getting between dangerous people and something they want badly enough to kill for. That's the kind of heat that burns everyone it touches. I know. These kids, they mean something to you. Razor thought about Maya's careful way of making sure her brothers ate before she did. About Tommy trying to act tough while secretly being terrified. But little Luis, who hadn't spoken a word since they'd arrived, but who'd started following Razor around like a lost puppy. Yeah, they do. Bull nodded slowly. Then we got a problem to solve. The chapter meeting that afternoon included 8 members of the Bakersfield Angels. These weren't weekend warriors playing dress-up. They were hard men who'd earned their patches through loyalty, courage, and blood. Razor knew them all. Snake, the sergeant-at-arms who'd done 2 tours in Iraq. Diesel, the road captain who could fix anything with an engine. Ghost, the club's intelligence specialist who had contacts throughout California's underworld. Bull explained the situation in broad terms, asking for a vote on whether the chapter would provide protection for Razor and the children. The discussion that followed was heated but brief. Those kids got nobody else, Snake said finally. We don't protect kids, what the hell are we? The vote was unanimous. Ghost volunteered to start making inquiries about professional tracking teams operating in the area. Snake offered to coordinate security patrols around Razor's trailer. Diesel promised to have emergency vehicles ready in case they needed to move fast. One more thing, Bull said, as the meeting broke up. Razor, you're moving the kids to the clubhouse tonight. Your place is too isolated, and if these hunters are as good as you think, they'll find it eventually. Razor started to object. The clubhouse was hardly an environment for children. We've got secure rooms upstairs, Bull continued. Windows are bulletproof, multiple exit routes, and round-the-clock security. Plus, if someone wants to get to those kids, they'll have to go through all of us to do it. That evening, Razor loaded the children's few possessions into his sidecar and prepared to move them to the clubhouse. As they rode through the desert, Maya pressed something into his hand, her school report card from before everything went wrong. It showed straight A's from an expensive private academy, with teacher comments about her intelligence and leadership potential. "I want you to have this," she said quietly. "So you know we're not just street kids. We're worth protecting." Razor folded the report card carefully and put it in his vest pocket, right next to his marine dog tags. For the first time in 20 years, he was part of something bigger than himself again. And for the first time since the kids had stumbled into his life, he felt like they might actually have a fighting chance. The hunters arrived in Bakersfield on a Tuesday morning, driving 3 black SUVs with government plates that Ghost quickly identified as fakes. They set up operations at the Comfort Inn on Highway 99, checking in under names that didn't match their credit cards. Razor watched them from across the parking lot through binoculars, studying their movements with the tactical eye of a man who'd once hunted Taliban commanders through the mountains of Afghanistan. 4 men, 1 woman, all moving with military precision. Professional gear, concealed weapons, and the kind of coordinated communication that suggested serious training. "They're not local muscle," he reported to Bull over his encrypted radio. "These are Tier 1 operators, military contractors, maybe ex-special forces." The woman appeared to be running the operation. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back severely, wearing a business suit that couldn't quite hide the shoulder holster underneath. She moved like someone accustomed to command, and the men deferred to her judgment on everything from room assignments to surveillance routes. By afternoon, they'd started their canvass of the town. The woman and one of the men visited Murphy's gas station first, showing photographs and asking the same questions Murphy had warned Razor about. Then they hit the diner, the hardware store, and the school district office. Their cover story was solid: Department of Children and Family Services, tracking 3 runaway children who were wards of the state. They had badges that looked authentic and paperwork that would fool most civilians, but their methods gave them away to anyone who knew what to look for. Real social workers didn't travel in armed convoys. They didn't conduct surveillance from multiple vehicle positions. And they definitely didn't carry the kind of weapons Ghost spotted when one of the men's jackets shifted. Wrong getting out of his SUV. Maya found Razor cleaning his .45 in the clubhouse's upstairs room that evening. She'd been quieter than usual all day, and he could see the fear in her eyes every time someone mentioned the hunters. "They're here because of us," she said, sitting down beside him on the old couch. "Yeah, they are. We should leave. Find somewhere else to go. We don't want you and your friends to get hurt because of us." Razor set down his gun and looked at this 8-year-old girl who was trying to carry the weight of the world on her small shoulders. "Maya, honey, you don't understand how this works. We don't abandon family. And like it or not, you 3 are family now." She pulled out that crumpled newspaper clipping she'd been carrying, an obituary he hadn't seen before. The headline read, "Prominent Tech Entrepreneurs Die in Car Accident." The article described her parents as founders of a successful software company, survived by 3 children and a brother. "The accident wasn't an accident," Maya said quietly. "Tommy and I heard Uncle Richard talking to someone on the phone after the funeral. He said the brakes on Daddy's car had been cut, and that he needed us gone before anyone figured out what really happened. The pieces were falling into place. Wealthy tech entrepreneurs dead in a staged accident. An uncle who needed the children eliminated to claim their inheritance. Professional killers tracking them across California. How much money are we talking about, Maya?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Daddy set up trust funds for us when we were babies. Tommy heard the lawyer say it was $6 million, plus the company shares. $6 million. More than enough to hire the kind of professional killers currently setting up shop in Bakersfield. More than enough to make 3 children's lives expendable. Maya, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Those people downstairs, the angels, they've made a choice to protect you. Not because of the money, but because it's the right thing to do. You don't owe us anything, and you don't need to carry this guilt." That night, Razor called a meeting with Bull, Snake, and Ghost. They gathered in Bull's office with the door locked, and the radio turned up loud enough to mask their conversation. $6 million inheritance, Razor reported. Uncle wants them dead so he can claim it legally. He's hired military contractors to make it happen. Bull whistled low. That explains the quality of opposition we're facing. Question is, Snake said, do we wait for them to make a move, or do we take the initiative? Ghost spread a map of Bakersfield on Bull's desk. They're professionals, but they're not locals. We know this territory better than they do. We can use that advantage. As they planned their defense of 3 children who'd trusted them with their lives, Razor touched the obituary in his pocket. Maya's parents had died protecting their children's future. Now it was up to an outlaw motorcycle club to make sure that sacrifice meant something. The first real test came at dawn on Thursday morning. Razor was teaching Tommy how to field strip a pistol in the clubhouse garage when Ghost's voice crackled over the radio with urgent warning. Black SUV, eastbound on Desert Valley Road, single-occupant male, headed straight for the old trailer. Razor's blood turned to ice. If they'd found his trailer, they were closer than anyone had anticipated. He grabbed his rifle and headed for his Harley, while Bull coordinated the response. Snake, take the back road and cut him off at the ridge. Diesel, you and Hammer get to the trailer first and see what he's after. Nobody engages unless he makes a hostile move. The ride to his trailer took 8 minutes at dangerous speeds across desert roads. Razor arrived to find the black SUV parked 50 yards from his Airstream, engines still running. Through his scope, he could see a man in tactical gear methodically searching the area around the trailer, photographing tire tracks and examining the ground for signs of recent occupancy. The hunter was good, professional. He'd already identified the motorcycle tracks leading away from the trailer and was documenting everything with digital precision. Razor watched him spend 20 minutes cataloging evidence before returning to his vehicle. But as the SUV pulled away, Diesel's voice came over the radio with troubling news. Razor, you need to see this. He left something behind. Attached to Razor's trailer door was a small digital device, a GPS tracker with a note written in precise block letters. We know where you've been. Soon we'll know where you are. It was psychological warfare designed to create fear and force mistakes. But it also revealed something important about their enemies. These weren't just killers. They were intelligence operatives who understood that winning meant controlling information as much as firepower. Back at the clubhouse, Razor found Maya in the kitchen helping Rosie, Bull's old lady, prepare lunch for the club. The sight of this small girl carefully slicing vegetables while wearing an oversized Hells Angels t-shirt was so incongruous. It made his chest tight. Maya looked up when he entered, reading the tension in his face immediately. They found your house. Yeah, they did. I'm sorry. Her voice was barely a whisper. This is all our fault. Razor knelt down so he was at her eye level. Maya, look at me. None of this is your fault. You didn't choose to have greedy relatives. You didn't choose to have your parents murdered. And you sure as hell didn't choose to end up on the streets. He reached into his vest and pulled out something he'd been carrying since his Marine days, a Purple Heart medal he'd earned after taking shrapnel in a firefight outside Kandahar. The medal was tarnished with age, but the ribbon was still bright. You know what this is. Maya nodded. It's for soldiers who get hurt protecting other people. That's right. And you know why I'm showing it to you? She shook her head. Because protecting people who can't protect themselves isn't a burden, Maya. It's an honor. It's what separates us from the animals. He closed her small hand around the medal. You keep this. And every time you start thinking this is your fault, you remember that some things are worth fighting for. That afternoon brought an unexpected development. Tommy approached Razor with something clutched in his hand, a small digital recorder he'd been hiding since they arrived at the clubhouse. I recorded Uncle Richard, Tommy said quietly. The night we ran away, Maya was crying and I couldn't sleep, so I went to get some water. I heard him on the phone in his study. Razor took the recorder with hands that weren't quite steady. What's on here, Tommy? Everything. Him talking about the car accident. About how he paid someone to cut the brake lines, about how he needs us dead before the trust fund transfers to us on Maya's 9th birthday. The recording was 43 minutes of damning evidence. Uncle Richard's voice, clear and unmistakable, discussing murder with clinical detachment. He talked about insurance policies, inheritance law, and the specific methods he'd used to eliminate his brother and sister-in-law. "When's Maya's 9th birthday?" Razor asked. "Next month," Tommy said. "October 15th, 3 weeks." They had 3 weeks before Maya's birthday triggered automatic inheritance transfers that would make their uncle's motive irrelevant. 3 weeks before professional killers would either complete their mission or face the possibility of exposure when legal proceedings began. That evening, Razor called his first family meeting. Maya, Tommy, and Luis gathered around the clubhouse's kitchen table while he explained what they were really up against. The children listened with the serious attention of people who understood their lives depended on making smart choices. "We've got evidence now," Razor told them. "Proof of what your uncle did. But that also makes us more dangerous to him. He's going to escalate." "What does that mean?" Maya asked. "It means the people hunting you are going to stop being careful. They're going to make their move soon." Luis spoke for the first time since arriving at the clubhouse. His voice was small and scared but determined. "Will you keep us safe, Uncle Jack?" The name hit Razor like a physical blow. Uncle Jack, not Razor, not Mr. Morrison, Uncle Jack, in 4 words. This little boy had given him something he'd never expected to have again, a family worth dying for. The truth came out on Friday night during what should have been a quiet family dinner. Maya had been picking at her food, clearly wrestling with something, when she finally set down her fork and looked directly at Razor. "I need to tell you everything," she said. "The whole truth." Bull leaned back in his chair, recognizing the gravity in the little girl's voice. The other angels, who'd been eating at nearby tables, quietly moved closer, understanding that whatever Maya was about to reveal would affect all of them. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a thick folder of documents she'd been hiding since their arrival. Legal papers, bank statements, and inheritance documents that told a story far more complex than anyone had imagined. "Mommy and Daddy didn't just have a software company," Maya began, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "They invented something called encryption protocols that protect government computers. The company was worth $50 million when they died." Razor felt the air leave his lungs. $50 million, not $6 million. $50 million. The trust funds Tommy heard about were just part of it, Maya continued, spreading the documents on the table. "We inherit everything on my 9th birthday. The company, the patents, the bank accounts. All of it," Snake whistled low. "Jesus Christ, kid. That's not inheritance money. That's start-your-own-country money?" Maya nodded miserably. "Uncle Richard has been running the company since Daddy died, but it's only temporary. When I turn 9, legal control transfers to us through the trust. He loses everything." Bull studied the legal documents with the careful attention of a man who'd learned to read contracts during years of negotiating with law enforcement. "Says here your uncle gets nothing if you kids are alive on your birthday. But if something happens to all 3 of you, he inherits as next of kin. That's why he had Mommy and Daddy killed," Tommy said, his voice hard with anger beyond his years. "And that's why he hired those people to find us." The magnitude of what they were facing hit everyone at the table simultaneously. This wasn't about protecting 3 orphaned children from a greedy relative. This was about standing between professional killers and one of the largest private fortunes in California. Ghost looked up from the patent documents he'd been examining. "These encryption protocols they developed, this is military-grade stuff. No wonder your uncle wants control of the company. He's not just after inheritance money. He's after technology worth hundreds of millions in government contracts." Razor stared at Maya's small face, understanding now why she'd been so reluctant to share details about their family. She'd been carrying the weight of knowledge that could get everyone around her killed. "Maya, honey, why didn't you tell us this before?" "Because I was scared you'd make us leave," she whispered. "Nobody wants to die for $50 million that belongs to someone else. I thought if you knew how much money was involved, you'd realize we weren't worth the risk." The honesty of her fear broke something inside Razor's chest. This 8-year-old girl had been calculating survival odds and trying to minimize the danger to people who'd shown her kindness. She'd been protecting them by withholding information that could have saved their lives. Bull stood up slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the chapter president did something that surprised everyone. He knelt down beside Maya's chair and took her small hand in his scarred fingers. "Little girl, let me explain something about the Hells Angels. We don't measure a person's worth by how much money they have. We measure it by their loyalty, their courage, and their character." He gestured around the room at the assembled bikers. "Every man in this room has seen you take care of your brothers. We've watched you worry about our safety more than your own. That makes you family, and family is worth any risk." The room erupted in agreement. Voices calling out "damn right" and "family first" and "nobody touches our kids." Maya started crying then, but they were tears of relief rather than fear. For the first time since her parents' death, she wasn't carrying the burden alone. That night, as Razor tucked the children into their beds in the secure upstairs room, Luis grabbed his hand. "Uncle Jack, are we really safe now?" Razor looked at this little boy who'd called him family, at Tommy who was trying so hard to be brave, at Maya who'd been protecting everyone around her while carrying impossible secrets. "Yeah, Luis, you're safe. I promise." It was a promise that would define everything that came next. Because somewhere across town, professional killers were planning their final assault on 3 children worth $50 million dead. Saturday morning brought preparation for war. Razor sat in Bull's office making phone calls to people he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. Marine buddies who'd moved on to private security, intelligence work, and other dangerous occupations that valued the skills they'd learned in foreign wars. The first call went to Carlos Rivera, a former Force Recon Marine who now ran a security consulting firm in Los Angeles. Carlos listened to Razor's situation without interrupting, then made a promise that reminded Razor why Marines never truly left the Brotherhood. "I'll be there by tonight with 2 of my best people. No charge, Jack. Semper Fi." The second call reached Janet Wong, a former military intelligence officer who specialized in counter-surveillance and electronic warfare. She agreed to provide technical support remotely, helping them monitor enemy communications and coordinate defensive measures. While Razor worked his old military contacts, the Angels prepared their own defenses. The clubhouse was transformed into a fortress with overlapping fields of fire, escape routes, and communication systems that would allow coordinated response to any assault. Snake supervised the installation of security cameras and motion sensors around the property perimeter. Diesel reinforced the building's structural weak points and prepared vehicles for rapid evacuation if necessary. Ghost established a command center with encrypted radios and computer equipment capable of monitoring law enforcement frequencies. But the most important preparation involved the children themselves. Razor gathered Maya, Tommy, and Luis in the clubhouse's back room and began teaching them skills no children should ever need to learn. If shooting starts, you get flat on the floor and stay there until someone you trust tells you it's safe, Razor explained, demonstrating proper cover positions. Don't try to see what's happening. Don't try to help. Your job is to stay alive. He showed them the emergency exit routes Bull had planned, hidden passages through the building's basement that led to escape tunnels connecting with the storm drain system. Each child received a backpack with water, food, and emergency supplies, along with instructions on where to go if they became separated. Maya absorbed the tactical training with the serious attention of someone who understood their lives depended on following instructions perfectly. Tommy tried to act brave but couldn't hide his fear. Luis clung to a stuffed animal someone had found for him, a small bear that had become his constant companion. "Uncle Jack," Maya said quietly as they finished the training session, "what happens if something happens to you?" Razor knelt down and pulled out the combat knife he'd carried through 2 tours in Afghanistan. The blade was engraved with his unit designation and the dates of his service, a piece of his history that had saved his life more times than he could count. This belonged to my grandfather in World War II, then my father in Vietnam, then me in Afghanistan, he told her, placing the knife in her small hands. It represents the warrior spirit that keeps people safe. If something happens to me, you take care of your brothers. You fight for your family. You'd never give up. Maya wrapped her fingers around the knife's handle with surprising steadiness. I understand. That afternoon, Carlos arrived with his promised backup, 2 former special operations, soldiers who brought military-grade equipment, and the kind of professional competence that made even the hardened angels feel more confident about their chances. The defensive plan they developed was sophisticated and brutal. Multiple layers of early warning systems, coordinated fields of fire, and fallback positions that would make any assault costly for the attackers. But everyone understood they were outnumbered and outgunned by professionals who had unlimited resources and government-quality equipment. Evening brought an unexpected visitor. The blonde woman, who'd been leading the hunting team, walked up to the clubhouse's front gate alone, hands visible and empty, clearly requesting a parley. Bull met her at the fence with Razor and Snake flanking him. Up close, she was even more impressive. Cold blue eyes that missed nothing, expensive clothes that couldn't hide the warrior's posture underneath, and the kind of confidence that came from winning fights that others didn't survive. Gentlemen, my name is Catherine Cross. I represent certain interests that would prefer to resolve this situation without unnecessary violence. What kind of resolution did you have in mind? Bull asked. The children come with us quietly. No one gets hurt. You receive compensation for your trouble and forget this ever happened. Razor stepped forward, his voice carrying 20 years of controlled violence. Lady, those kids are under our protection. That's not negotiable. Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Mr. Morrison, I've read your file. Distinguished military service, multiple commendations for valor. I respect what you've accomplished. But you're protecting 3 children from forces you don't understand for reasons that will get you and your friends killed. Try us. Catherine's expression hardened. The people I work for have unlimited resources and no moral constraints. They will burn this building down, with everyone inside if necessary. The children won't survive anyway, but you can choose whether your friends die with them. The threat hung in the air between them like a drawn blade. But Bull's response came without hesitation. Ma'am, you're on Angel's property making threats against our family. I suggest you leave now. Catherine nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. 12 hours, gentlemen. Then we come for them. The betrayal came from within, as betrayals always do. Razor discovered it by accident while checking the perimeter defenses at 3 in the morning. He caught Weasel, a probationary member of the chapter, crouched behind the storage shed with a cell phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, they're all here. The kids are in the upstairs room, northeast corner. Security detail changes at 4 a.m. Razor's blood turned to ice as he listened to Weasel providing detailed intelligence about their defensive positions to someone on the other end of the call. Without hesitation, he drew his sidearm and stepped out of the shadows. Hang up the phone, Weasel. The younger man spun around, his face pale in the moonlight. The phone tumbled from his hand as he realized he'd been caught red-handed selling out his own club. Razor. I can explain. Shut up. Razor kept his weapon trained on the traitor while he picked up the phone. The line was already dead. How long? How long what? How long have you been feeding them information? Weasel's shoulders sagged with defeat. Since Tuesday. They approached me at the bar downtown, offered me $50,000 cash to keep them informed about club activities. $50,000. More money than a part-time mechanic like Weasel would see in 5 years of honest work. Enough to buy betrayal from someone who'd sworn loyalty to the Brotherhood. Razor marched Weasel into the clubhouse at gunpoint and woke Bull with news that shattered everyone's sense of security. Within minutes, the entire chapter was assembled in the main room, their faces reflecting the fury that came with discovering a traitor in their midst. "How much do they know?" Bull asked, his voice deadly calm. "Everything," Weasel admitted, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "God rotations, weapon positions, escape routes. I gave them the building plans and told them about the ex-military guys helping you." Snake stepped forward with violence in his eyes, but Bull held up a hand to stop him. The chapter president understood that information was more valuable than revenge at this moment. "What's their assault plan?" "They're moving tonight. 4 a.m. when the guard rotation changes. They've got explosives to breach the wall, flashbangs to disorient everyone inside, and orders to eliminate all adult witnesses." The timeline had collapsed. Catherine Cross had lied about the 12-hour deadline, using the negotiation as cover while her team prepared for immediate assault. In 90 minutes, professional killers would storm the clubhouse with overwhelming firepower and tactical surprise. Razor felt rage building in his chest like a physical pressure. These children had trusted him to keep them safe, and he'd failed before the real fight even began. Maya, Tommy, and Luis were sleeping upstairs, believing they were protected by people who couldn't even protect themselves from infiltration. "There's something else," Weasel continued miserably. "They have someone inside the sheriff's department. After they kill everyone here, they're going to claim it was a drug raid that went bad. Official story will be that the Angels were holding kidnapped children and opened fire on federal agents. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Not just professional killers, but official cover-up reaching into local law enforcement. Uncle Richard had bought enough official protection to ensure that no investigation would follow the clubhouse massacre. Bull made rapid decisions with the calm efficiency of a man who'd survived decades of violent confrontations. "Ghost, start the evacuation protocol. Get the kids out through the tunnel system. Carlos, your people take overwatch positions in the hills. Snake, rig the building for demolition charges. What about him?" Carlos asked, nodding toward Weasel. Bull looked at the traitor with contempt that could have frozen. "Blood, tie him up in the basement. If we survive this, the club will deal with him according to our traditions." As the Angels began emergency evacuation procedures, Razor went upstairs to wake the children. He found Maya already awake, sitting by the window and watching the preparations in the yard below. "They're coming tonight, aren't they?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, they are. But we're getting you out of here." Maya pulled out a burner phone Razor had never seen before, a device she'd been hiding since their arrival at the clubhouse. The screen showed dozens of text messages from an unknown number. "Uncle Richard has been texting me for days," she said. "He knows we're here. He says if we come with his people quietly, he'll let you and your friends live." Razor stared at the phone, understanding that Maya had been carrying this burden alone while trying to protect the people who were protecting her. "Maya, you can't trust anything he says. I know." She deleted the messages and handed him the phone. "But Uncle Jack, what if people die because of us? What if good people get hurt protecting kids who might not even survive anyway?" Razor took her small face in his hands and looked into eyes that were far too serious for someone her age. "Maya, listen to me. Some things are worth dying for. Family is worth dying for. And you three are family now." The real enemy revealed himself with a phone call that came just as Razor was leading the children through the emergency tunnels beneath the clubhouse. Maya's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Uncle Richard, and against every tactical instinct he possessed, Razor answered it. Well, the famous Jack Morrison. Marine Force Recon, 2 tours in Afghanistan, multiple commendations for valor. The voice was cultured, educated, and completely without warmth. "I know all about you, Mr. Morrison. Richard Blackwood, I presume. Dr. Richard Blackwood, actually. PhD in computer science from MIT, CEO of Blackwood Technologies, and soon to be the permanent guardian of my dear departed brother's children." Razor kept the children moving through the tunnel while he talked, using hand signals to guide them toward the storm drain exit that would take them to safety. But something in Blackwood's tone made him realize their situation was even worse than he'd imagined. "You made one critical mistake. Mr. Morrison, you assumed this was about money. $50 million seems like a pretty good motive for murder." Blackwood's laugh was cold and precise. "The inheritance is irrelevant. What matters are the encryption protocols my brother developed for the Defense Department. Military-grade cybersecurity systems that protect everything from nuclear launch codes to satellite communications." The tunnel opened into a storm drain that connected to the city's water management system. Razor pushed the children ahead of him while he tried to understand the true scope of what they were facing. "Those protocols are worth billions in government contracts," Blackwood continued. "But more importantly, they're the foundation for a new kind of warfare. Cyber attacks that can cripple entire nations without firing a single shot." Maya stumbled in the darkness ahead of him, and Razor caught her before she fell. The little girl was exhausting herself, trying to keep up with adult-length strides through unfamiliar terrain. "Here's what you don't understand. Mr. Morrison, I didn't hire Catherine Cross and her team to kill my niece and nephews. I hired them to capture the children alive." Razor's blood went cold. "What?" "Maya has been trained by her father since she was 5 years old. She knows the encryption keys, the access codes, and the theoretical foundations that make the entire system work. Her father was paranoid about corporate espionage, so he embedded the most critical information in his daughter's memory rather than writing it down." The storm drain exit came into view, a grated opening that led to a concrete channel behind an abandoned warehouse. Carlos and his team were supposed to meet them there with vehicles for the final evacuation. "Tommy and Luis are insurance," Blackwood continued conversationally. "Leverage to ensure Maya's cooperation. She'll do anything to protect her little brothers, including providing me with information that will make Blackwood Technologies the most powerful cybersecurity firm in the world." Razor reached the grate and found it locked from the outside. No sign of Carlos or the extraction team. They were trapped in the storm drain with professional killers closing in from behind and no way forward. "You see, Mr. Morrison, I don't need the children dead. I need them compliant, and nothing ensures compliance like the threat of violence against people they care about." The sound of boots in the tunnel behind them confirmed Razor's worst fears. Catherine Cross and her team had followed them into the drainage system. The children huddled against him in the darkness, understanding that their escape route had become a trap. "Maya, sweetheart," Blackwood's voice carried false affection through the phone speaker. "I know you can hear me. This can all end right now. Come with my people, and Mr. Morrison and his friends will be allowed to live." Maya took the phone from Razor with trembling hands. "Uncle Richard, why did you kill Mommy and Daddy?" "Because your father refused to share the encryption protocols with the government agencies that need them. He was an idealistic fool who thought he could control technology that belongs to the national security apparatus. Daddy said you were jealous of him. Your father was always the genius, Maya, but genius without ambition is useless. I have the vision to use his work for purposes he never imagined." Flashlight beams appeared in the tunnel behind them. Catherine Cross's voice echoed through the concrete space with professional calm. "End of the line, Morrison. Send the children out, and we can discuss terms." Razor looked at Maya's small face in the dim light filtering through the grate above them. She was 8 years old, carrying encryption codes worth billions of dollars in her memory, and the only thing standing between her uncle and unlimited power. "Maya," Razor whispered, "do you remember what I taught you about fighting for family?" She nodded, her hand going to the combat knife he'd given her. "Then get ready to fight." The decision that would define the rest of his life came to Razor in the concrete darkness of the storm drain. Surrounded by 3 children who trusted him completely and professional killers who would show no mercy, he looked at his Harley keys in his hand, the symbol of 20 years of freedom, independence and running from responsibility. Without hesitation, he pressed the keys into Maya's palm. "Maya, I need you to listen very carefully. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to create a distraction that will give you and your brothers a chance to escape. When I do, you take Tommy and Luis and you run as fast as you can to the surface. I'm not leaving you, Maya whispered fiercely. Yes, you are. Because that's what family does. We protect each other, even when it hurts. Razor pulled out his sidearm and checked the magazine. 15 rounds against professional operators with superior equipment and tactical advantage. Those keys go to my bike. It's parked behind Murphy's gas station. You remember Murphy? Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. You get on that bike and you ride to the sheriff's station. You tell them everything. About your uncle, about the mercenaries, about the encryption codes. You make them listen. Tommy grabbed Razor's arm with surprising strength. Uncle Jack, don't do this. We can all get out together. No, son, we can't, but you can. And that's what matters. Razor looked at each child in turn, memorizing their faces in the dim light. Maya, you're the strongest person I've ever met. Tommy, you're brave enough to protect your family no matter what. Luis, you've got a heart big enough to forgive even the people who hurt you. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Catherine Cross was positioning her team for final assault, probably expecting Razor to surrender when faced with impossible odds. Remember what I taught you about being family, Razor continued quietly. You take care of each other. You never give up. And you never let anyone make you ashamed of who you are. He pulled out the small sketch Maya had drawn of him days earlier, a child's artwork showing him as a guardian angel with motorcycle wings. She'd given it to him shyly, saying it was how she saw him. Now he pressed it back into her hands. I want you to keep this. So you remember that sometimes broken people can still do good things. Maya threw her arms around his neck with desperate strength. I love you, Uncle Jack. I love you too, sweetheart. All of you. Catherine Cross's voice echoed through the tunnel with false reasonableness. Morrison, you're out of options. Send the children out now. And I give you my word that no one else needs to get hurt. Razor positioned himself between the children and the approaching mercenaries, using his body as a shield while they prepared to run. The grate above them was locked, but Tommy was small enough to squeeze through the gaps in the metal framework. When the shooting starts, you go up and out, Razor instructed. Don't look back. Don't try to help. Just run. He thought about the last 20 years of his life. The drinking, the isolation, the deliberate avoidance of human connection that had defined his existence since leaving the Marines. Then he thought about the last 2 weeks, making breakfast for 3 kids, teaching Tommy to throw a baseball, listening to Maya read bedtime stories to her brothers. For the first time since Afghanistan, Jack Morrison felt like his life had actual purpose. Catherine, he called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd faced death before and survived. I've got a counter-proposal. I'm listening. You let the kids go and I'll tell you where they hid the original encryption protocols. The physical documents their father kept as backup. It was a lie, but it was believable enough to buy time. Catherine Cross paused, obviously considering the possibility that physical documents might exist beyond the information stored in Maya's memory. What documents? Research notes, algorithm specifications, implementation details. Everything you'd need to replicate the system without relying on an 8-year-old's memory. The pause stretched longer. Catherine was weighing the value of immediate capture against the possibility of obtaining complete technical documentation. Where are they hidden? Let the kids go first. Then we'll discuss locations. Behind him, Razor heard Tommy boosting Luis through the grate opening. The little boy was small enough to squeeze through easily, followed by Tommy himself. Maya hesitated, clearly unwilling to abandon the man who'd become her family. Go, Razor whispered. That's an order from your Uncle Jack. Maya kissed his cheek quickly, then scrambled through the great opening just as Catherine Cross lost patience with negotiations and ordered her team to advance. The last thing Razor saw before the shooting started was 3 children disappearing into the California night. Carrying his Harley keys and the hope that sometimes courage was enough to beat impossible odds, Maya's drawing lay crumpled in the storm drain beside. Razor's empty magazines and pools of blood that belonged to people who would never go home again. The firefight had lasted 17 minutes, an eternity measured. In muzzle flashes and ricocheting bullets in confined concrete space, Razor had taken 3 rounds. Center mass before Catherine Cross's tactical team finally overwhelmed his position. But those 17 minutes had been enough. Long enough for 3 children to disappear into the Bakersfield night with information that could either save them or get them killed. Catherine knelt beside Razor's wounded form, her professional composure cracked by the cost of capturing one stubborn Marine. 2 of her men were dead, another was bleeding out from a lung shot, and their mission timeline was completely destroyed. "Where are the backup documents?" she demanded, pressing a field dressing against the worst of Razor's wounds. "The encryption protocols you promised?" Razor's response came through gritted teeth and blood-flecked lips. "Go to hell. Those children won't survive 12 hours on their own. Help us find them, and we can guarantee their safety. Lady, those kids are tougher than you think. And they've got something you'll never understand." "What's that?" "Family!" Catherine's radio crackled with urgent communications from her command post. The Hells Angels had abandoned their clubhouse before the assault, taking their wounded and disappearing into the network of safe houses and allied contacts that had protected outlaws for decades. Local law enforcement was mobilizing, despite official orders, to stay clear of the operation. And somewhere in Bakersfield, 3 children carrying $50 million in inheritance money and billions in cybersecurity secrets were running for their lives. "Dr. Blackwood wants to speak with you," Catherine said, pulling out a satellite phone. Richard Blackwood's voice carried across the connection with cold fury. "Mr. Morrison, you've caused considerable inconvenience for a relatively simple operation. Should have minded your own business, Doc. Where are my niece and nephews?" "Safe from you. That's all that matters." Blackwood's laugh was without humor. "Mr. Morrison, you've delayed the inevitable, not prevented it. Those children have no money, no identification, and no understanding of the forces pursuing them. They'll be captured within hours." What Blackwood didn't know was that Maya's childlike drawing contained more than artistic expression. Hidden beneath the crayon marks were penciled notes, emergency contact numbers, safe house addresses, and communication protocols that Razor had taught her during their tactical training sessions. The children had reached Murphy's gas station to find Razor's Harley exactly where he'd promised, along with the emergency kit he'd hidden in the saddlebags months earlier. Cash, prepaid phones, fake identification documents, and detailed maps of escape routes throughout California. Maya had taken charge with the calm determination of someone who'd learned that survival meant making hard choices quickly. She'd memorized every detail of Razor's contingency plans, understanding that their lives depended on following his instructions precisely. "Tommy, you drive," she'd ordered, boosting her 10-year-old brother onto the motorcycle. "Luis, you hold on tight. We're going to Aunt Martha's house." Martha Collins had been Razor's friend for 20 years, one of the few civilians who understood that sometimes good people did illegal things for the right reasons. Her farmhouse sat on 40 acres of isolated land 30 miles outside Bakersfield, protected by terrain that made surveillance difficult and approach routes that could be watched from defensive positions. By dawn, the children were eating breakfast in Martha's kitchen, while she made phone calls to people who could help 3 orphaned kids disappear permanently. The underground network that protected domestic violence victims, witness protection cases, and political refugees was vast and sophisticated, operated by people who understood that sometimes official channels failed to protect the innocent. "Those men who hurt Uncle Jack?" Louis asked quietly over his scrambled eggs. "Are they going to come here too?" Maya looked at her youngest brother with eyes that had aged years in a single night. "Maybe, but we're not going to let them hurt anyone else." She pulled out the combat knife Razor had given her, its engraved blade catching morning light through Martha's kitchen window. The weapon represented more than protection. It symbolized the warrior spirit that had been passed down through generations of people who fought for family. "We're going to end this," Maya said with quiet determination that would have made Razor proud. "We're going to make Uncle Richard pay for what he did to Mommy and Daddy and Uncle Jack, Martha." Collins looked at this 8-year-old girl making promises of vengeance and recognized something that chilled her to the bone. Maya wasn't just planning survival anymore, she was planning war. The war began at Martha's farmhouse on a Tuesday morning when Tommy discovered something that changed everything. While Maya coordinated escape plans with Martha's underground contacts, and Luis played with the farm's border collie, Tommy had been systematically searching through the equipment Razor had hidden in his motorcycle saddlebags. "Maya, you need to see this," Tommy called from the barn where he'd been, examining the emergency supplies hidden beneath the fake identification documents. In cash reserves was a small digital recorder, the same device Tommy had used to capture Uncle Richard's confession weeks earlier. But this recording was different. It contained 47 minutes of conversation between Catherine Cross and her team, accidentally captured when Tommy had forgotten to turn off the device during their escape from the clubhouse. Maya listened to the recording with growing amazement. Catherine Cross's professional facade completely disappeared when she thought no one was listening. The mercenary discussed backup plans, communication protocols, financial arrangements, and most importantly, the location of her command post. "They're using the old Blackwood Technologies warehouse on Industrial Boulevard," Maya realized. "That's where Uncle Richard is coordinating everything." But the recording contained something even more valuable. Catherine Cross's team had been hired through a private military contracting firm called Meridian Solutions, and their operations were being funded through a complex network of offshore accounts tied directly to Uncle Richard's personal finances. "This is evidence," Martha said, after listening to the entire recording. "Real evidence that proves your uncle hired these people to kill you." Maya studied the tactical maps Razor had taught her to read, identifying the warehouse location and the surrounding industrial district. The area was isolated, perfect for covert operations, but also vulnerable to the kind of asymmetric warfare tactics that one determined 8-year-old could implement with proper preparation. "Martha, I need you to make some phone calls." "What kind of phone calls, honey?" "The kind that bring the right people to the wrong place at exactly the right time." Maya's plan was audacious in its simplicity. She would use Uncle Richard's own resources against him, turning his coordination center into a trap that would expose his conspiracy to federal authorities who could not be bought or intimidated. The first call went to the FBI's Los Angeles field office, where Maya identified herself as a kidnapping victim with information about government cybersecurity breaches. The second call reached the Defense Department's Inspector General, reporting suspected theft of classified encryption protocols. The third call contacted the California Attorney General's office with evidence of interstate murder conspiracies. Each agency received detailed information about the Blackwood Technologies warehouse, along with recordings that proved federal crimes were being committed by people with access to classified government systems. "They'll all arrive at the same time," Maya explained to Tommy and Luis. "Uncle Richard won't be able to bribe or threaten all of them simultaneously, but Maya's most important call went to Bull Martinez at the Hells Angels clubhouse. The chapter president listened to her plan, with growing respect for the tactical intelligence this little girl had developed under pressure. "You sure about this, little sister? Once this goes down, there's no taking it back. Uncle Jack taught me that some things are worth fighting for," Maya replied. "Family is worth fighting for." Tommy had been working on his own contribution to the plan, using the computer skills their father had taught him. He'd been systematically hacking into Uncle Richard's business networks, downloading financial records, email communications, and corporate documents that proved the conspiracy extended far beyond simple inheritance disputes. Maya, look at this. Tommy showed her bank transfer records on Martha's laptop computer. Uncle Richard has been stealing from the company for months. He's moved almost $20 million into private accounts. The embezzlement evidence provided additional motivation for federal investigators, proving that Uncle Richard's crimes included corporate fraud, tax evasion, and misappropriation of government contract funds. Luis contributed to the plan in his own way, using the stuffed bear Uncle Jack had given him to hide the small digital recorder. The toy's innocent appearance would allow him to capture conversations that adults would never suspect were being monitored. "Are we really going to stop the bad men?" Luis asked his sister as they prepared for what might be their final confrontation with the forces that had destroyed their family. Maya checked the combat knife Uncle Jack had given her, its engraved blade representing the warrior spirit that protected family at any cost. "Yes, Luis, we're going to stop them. For Mommy and Daddy, for Uncle Jack, for everyone who tried to keep us safe. The plan would either end Uncle Richard's conspiracy permanently or get all 3 children killed." But Maya had learned something important from watching Razor make impossible choices under pressure. Sometimes courage was more important than odds. Sometimes family was worth any risk. And sometimes an 8-year-old girl with the right training could accomplish what professional soldiers could not. The confrontation came at the Blackwood Technologies warehouse exactly as Maya had planned. But Uncle Richard's desperation made him more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. When federal agents surrounded the building at precisely 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Richard Blackwood made a decision that revealed the true depths of his corruption. He activated a contingency plan that no one had expected. "Maya, my dear niece," his voice echoed through the warehouse's public address system as FBI agents established perimeter positions around the building. "I know you're listening. You've been very clever, but not quite clever enough." Maya crouched behind shipping containers in the warehouse loading dock, exactly where Bull Martinez had positioned her according to the tactical plan they'd developed. Tommy and Luis were safely hidden with Martha in a defensive position 2 blocks away, protected by angels who understood that family came before everything else. "You see, Maya, I've spent the last 6 months preparing for exactly this scenario. Federal investigations, asset seizures, criminal prosecutions. I've planned for all of it." Through the warehouse skylights, Maya could see FBI snipers taking positions on surrounding buildings. SWAT teams prepared for building entry. Media helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live coverage of what was being described as a major cybersecurity investigation. "The encryption protocols your father developed aren't just worth billions in government contracts," Uncle Richard continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. "They're the foundation for a new kind of warfare, and several foreign governments have made very generous offers for that technology." Maya's blood went cold as she understood what Uncle Richard was really threatening. He wasn't just planning to steal the family inheritance. He was planning to sell military secrets to America's enemies. But here's what you don't understand, Maya. Those federal agents surrounding this building think they're rescuing kidnapped children and preventing corporate fraud. They don't know they're actually preventing the largest intelligence breach in American history. Catherine Cross's voice joined the conversation through the same public address system. "Maya, this can still end peacefully. Come out with your hands visible, and we can discuss terms that protect everyone's interests." Maya activated the small radio Bull had given her, broadcasting on a frequency that would reach both the Hells Angels and the FBI tactical teams simultaneously. "This is Maya Blackwood. I'm 8 years old, and my uncle killed my parents because he wanted to steal $50 million and sell government secrets to foreign countries. I have recordings that prove everything. The radio transmission created immediate chaos in the FBI command structure. Negotiators, who'd been treating this as a corporate crime investigation, suddenly realized they were dealing with potential treason and child endangerment. "Maya, sweetheart," Uncle Richard's voice carried false affection that couldn't hide his growing desperation. "You're making this much more complicated than it needs to be. Why don't you come up to the office level so we can have a family conversation?" Maya looked at the combat knife Uncle Jack had given her, its engraved blade catching light from the warehouse's industrial fixtures. She thought about everything Razor had taught her about courage, family, and fighting for people who couldn't protect themselves. "Uncle Richard, I want to ask you something." "Of course. Dear, do you remember teaching me to ride a bicycle when I was 5? There was a pause, and when Uncle Richard responded, his voice carried genuine confusion. "Yes, I remember. You were so determined to learn without training wheels. You held onto the seat and ran alongside me until I could balance by myself. You said that's what family does. We help each other learn to be strong." "That's right, Maya. Then why did you kill Mommy and Daddy?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. FBI negotiators, Hell's Angels, media reporters, and federal agents all waited for an answer that would define everything. That happened next. Uncle Richard's response came with the cold precision of someone who'd abandoned human emotion in favor of pure calculation. "Because, Maya, sometimes family gets in the way of destiny. Your parents were weak. They thought technology should serve humanity instead of power. I understand that power serves itself." It was a full confession, broadcast live on national television and recorded by multiple federal agencies simultaneously. Uncle Richard Blackwood had just admitted to murdering his own brother and sister-in-law for money and ideology. Maya triggered the small explosive device Bull had taught her to use, not enough to hurt anyone, but sufficient to create the distraction she needed for the final phase of her plan. "Uncle Richard," she said quietly into her radio as smoke began filling the warehouse, "you taught me to ride a bicycle, but Uncle Jack taught me to fight." Justice came in the form of FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen, who found Maya hiding in the warehouse's ventilation system 47 minutes after Uncle Richard's televised confession ended with his arrest for treason, murder, and conspiracy against the United States government. Agent Chen was small, Asian American, and spoke with the kind of gentle authority that made traumatized children feel safe. She helped Maya down from the air ducts and wrapped her in an emergency blanket while federal agents secured the crime scene around them. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" "No, ma'am. But my Uncle Jack is hurt bad. They shot him in the storm drains under the city. He needs help." Agent Chen radioed for medical teams while she knelt beside Maya in the warehouse loading dock. Around them, FBI agents were arresting Catherine Cross and her surviving mercenaries, seizing computer equipment that contained evidence of the largest private intelligence operation in California history. "Maya, I need you to tell me everything that happened, from the beginning." For the next 2 hours, Maya provided testimony that would eventually send 12 people to federal prison for terms ranging from 25 years to life without parole. She spoke clearly, precisely, and without the emotional breakdown that most adults would have experienced after weeks of terror and violence. Agent Chen recognized something extraordinary in this 8-year-old witness. Maya Blackwood possessed the kind of resilience and tactical intelligence that could only be developed through extreme circumstances and exceptional mentoring. "Who taught you to plan operations like this?" Agent Chen asked as Maya finished, describing the complex trap that had exposed Uncle Richard's conspiracy. "Uncle Jack, he said that protecting family was the most important mission anyone could have. The search for Razor's body in the storm drain system took 6 hours and involved urban rescue specialists with specialized equipment for underground recovery operations. When they finally found him, he was unconscious from blood loss, but alive, protected by tactical armor that had absorbed most of the damage from multiple gunshot wounds." Maya refused to leave the hospital waiting room while surgeons worked to save the man who'd become her family. Tommy and Louise slept in chairs beside her, exhausted but refusing to go anywhere until they knew Uncle Jack would survive. Bull Martinez arrived at the hospital with news that changed everything. The Hells Angels chapter had voted unanimously to establish a legal defense fund for Razor's medical expenses and any criminal charges that might result from the warehouse operation. "Little sister," Bull said to Maya as they waited for medical updates, "your Uncle Jack is going to be fine. He's too stubborn to die from something as simple as getting shot by professionals." Agent Chen approached the family group with documents that represented the culmination of the federal investigation. Uncle Richard's arrest had triggered a comprehensive review of government cybersecurity contracts, revealing corruption that extended into multiple federal agencies. "Maya, the information you provided has prevented what could have been the largest intelligence breach in American history. The encryption protocols your parents developed were being sold to foreign governments through networks we didn't even know existed. The financial recovery was equally impressive. Federal asset forfeiture proceedings had seized Uncle Richard's offshore accounts, recovering not just the $50 million inheritance, but an additional $30 million in embezzled corporate funds and illegal international transactions." "What happens to us now?" Tommy asked Agent Chen quietly. "That's going to be up to family court. But I think I know what the recommendation will be." When Razor finally woke up 3 days later, he found Maya asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed, still clutching the combat knife he'd given her and the crumpled drawing that showed him as a guardian angel with motorcycle wings. "Uncle Jack." Maya's voice was small and scared, the voice of a little girl who'd been trying to be strong for too long. "I'm here, sweetheart. Are we really safe now?" Razor looked at this remarkable child who'd orchestrated the downfall of a conspiracy that had threatened national security while protecting her family at every step. Maya had shown courage that would have impressed seasoned Marines, intelligence that had outsmarted federal criminals, and loyalty that had saved everyone she cared about. "Yeah, Maya, we're safe. Uncle Richard is in federal prison. The bad people who worked for him are never getting out, and Agent Chen has some paperwork she wants us to sign." The paperwork was adoption documents, emergency custody orders that would make Jack Morrison the legal guardian of 3 children who'd chosen him as family long before any court made it official. Maya climbed carefully onto the hospital bed and curled up beside. The man who taught her that broken people could still do good things, that family was worth any risk, and that sometimes an 8-year-old girl with the right training could save the world. 6 months after the warehouse confrontation, Jack Morrison stood in the Kern County Courthouse wearing his best leather jacket and a tie that Maya had helped him select. In his weathered hands, he held adoption papers that would legally transform 3 extraordinary children into his family. Judge Patricia Williams had presided over family court for 23 years, but she'd never seen a case quite like this one. The FBI's recommendation for emergency adoption was unprecedented, supported by testimony from federal agents, Hells Angels, and social workers who all agreed that Jack Morrison represented the children's best hope for stability and protection. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Williams said as she reviewed the extensive case file, "this court has received some unusual character references for your petition. The character references included letters from Bull Martinez describing Razor's loyalty and dedication to family values, from Agent Chen detailing his heroic protection of federal witnesses, and from Martha Collins testifying to his transformation from isolated veteran to devoted father figure." Maya sat in the front row of the courtroom, wearing a new dress that Rosie had bought her for the occasion. Tommy fidgeted in his fur suit, while Luis clutched the stuffed bear that had helped them survive their worst moments. All 3 children watched the proceedings, with the serious attention of people who understood that their futures were being decided. "The state's investigation confirms that you've provided exceptional care for these children under extraordinary circumstances. Judge Williams continued. Maya's academic testing shows she's performing 2 grade levels above her age group. Tommy has joined the local Little League team and maintained perfect school attendance. Luis has begun speaking regularly and shows no signs of the trauma-related disorders that were initially diagnosed. The financial arrangements were equally remarkable. The recovered inheritance funds had been placed in federal trust accounts that would support the children's education and future needs while providing Jack with resources to create a stable home. Environment, federal prosecutors had also arranged for Jack to receive a substantial reward from the Department of Justice for preventing the intelligence breach that Uncle Richard had planned. The money wasn't enough to make them wealthy, but it was sufficient to buy a real house with bedrooms for each child and space for the kind of family life they deserved. Mr. Morrison, do you understand the responsibilities you're accepting by adopting these children? Jack looked at Maya, Tommy, and Luis, 3 kids who'd survived horrors that would have broken most adults, who'd shown courage that had impressed federal agents, and who'd chosen him as family when they could have chosen anyone in the world. Yes, Your Honor, I understand completely. And children, do you want Mr. Morrison to be your legal father? Maya stood up with the poise of someone much older than her 8 years. Your Honor, Uncle Jack taught us that family isn't about blood. It's about choosing to protect and love each other, no matter what happens. We chose him, and he chose us. Tommy joined his sister, his voice stronger than it had been during their first terrifying nights at the clubhouse. He saved our lives, but more than that, he gave us hope. He made us feel like we were worth protecting. Luis simply nodded and held up his stuffed bear, the toy that had carried their secret recordings through the most dangerous moments of their journey. Judge Williams signed the adoption decree with ceremonial precision, her own eyes reflecting the emotional weight of legalizing a family that had been forged through shared danger and mutual protection. Congratulations, Mr. Morrison, Maya, Tommy, and Luis Morrison. You are now officially and permanently a family under the laws of California and the United States. The celebration afterward took place at the Hells Angels clubhouse, which had been transformed into something resembling a traditional family party. Rosie had organized decorations, Bull had arranged for a cake, and the entire chapter had contributed to creating an environment where 3 children could celebrate their new legal status surrounded by the extended family that had protected. The Agent Chen attended the party, bringing gifts and a letter from the director of the FBI expressing the government's gratitude for the children's courage and Jack's service to national security. She also brought news about the ongoing prosecutions resulting from their investigation. Uncle Richard will never see freedom again, she told Maya privately. The foreign intelligence connections were even more extensive than we initially realized. Your testimony helped us prevent what could have been catastrophic damage to American cybersecurity. As the party wound down, Jack found himself standing outside the clubhouse with his new family, watching the California sunset paint the desert landscape in shades of gold and red. The adoption papers in his pocket felt heavier than any military decoration he'd ever earned, representing responsibilities and rewards he'd never imagined possible. Maya slipped her hand into his, a gesture that had become natural over months of building trust and affection. "Dad," she said quietly, testing the word that would define their relationship for the rest of their lives. "Yeah, sweetheart. Thank you for choosing us." Jack Morrison looked at his family, his actual, legal, permanent family, and understood that sometimes the best things in life came from the worst circumstances, and that broken people really could create something beautiful together. 1 year after the adoption, the Morrison family lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of Bakersfield, where former Marine Jack Morrison had learned to navigate the complexities of parent-teacher conferences, soccer practice schedules, and bedtime story rotations. The house itself was nothing spectacular, a ranch-style home with a large backyard where Tommy could practice baseball and Maya could conduct the science. experiments that had become her latest passion. But it represented something that none of them had believed possible during those terrifying weeks when survival seemed impossible. Maya, now 9 years old, had skipped 2 grade levels and was already taking high school mathematics courses through an accelerated program. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, regularly called Jack to discuss Maya's exceptional abilities and her mature approach to learning that reflected experiences far beyond her chronological age. Maya shows remarkable leadership skills, Mrs. Rodriguez explained during their most recent conference. She tutors younger students, mediates playground conflicts, and demonstrates the kind of emotional intelligence we typically see in much older children. What Mrs. Rodriguez didn't know was that Maya spent her free time studying cybersecurity textbooks and encryption theory, carrying forward her father's legacy while developing her own understanding of the technology that had cost her family so much. Tommy had transformed from a scared 10-year-old into the star pitcher of his little league team, the Bakersfield Wildcats. Jack attended every game, often accompanied by Bull Martinez and other angels who become unofficial uncles to the Morrison children. "Strike 3, the umpire called as Tommy delivered a fastball that left the opposing batter shaking his head in amazement. Jack cheered from the stands, his voice joining those of other parents who'd accepted this former outlaw biker as a legitimate member of their community. The transformation hadn't been easy. Some parents had initially objected to a Hells Angel participating in youth sports, but Tommy's talent and Jack's obvious dedication to fatherhood had gradually won over most. Skeptics. Luis, now 7, had become the family's emotional center. The child whose capacity for forgiveness and joy reminded everyone that healing was possible even after terrible trauma. He'd started taking piano lessons, showing a natural musical ability that filled their house with melodies that chased away the echoes of darker times. "Dad, listen to this," Luis called from the living room piano, playing a piece he'd composed himself, a simple melody that somehow captured the feeling of safety and home. Jack listened from the kitchen while preparing dinner, a domestic skill he'd developed through necessity and perfected through practice. The sound of Luis's music, Maya's voice as she helped Tommy with homework, and the ordinary chaos of family life created a symphony that was better than any silence he'd ever known. The family photo on the mantelpiece showed 4 people who'd chosen each other despite circumstances that should have driven them apart. Jack in his best shirt, Maya with her arm around Tommy, Luis holding his stuffed bear, all of them smiling with the kind of genuine happiness that couldn't be faked or forced. But the most meaningful artifact in their home was a display case that Jack had built to honor their journey together. It contained Maya's original crumpled photograph of her parents, Tommy's digital recorder that had captured Uncle Richard's confession, Luis's stuffed bear that had carried them through their darkest moments, and Jack's Purple Heart medal that Maya had returned to him on Father's Day. "We should write a book about what happened to us," Maya suggested one evening as the family gathered for their weekly movie night, a tradition that Jack had instituted to ensure they spent regular time together without the distractions of homework, chores, or outside obligations. "Who would believe it?" Tommy asked, settling onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn. "People need to know that families can be created in lots of different ways," Maya said seriously, "and that sometimes the best parents are the ones who choose to love kids who aren't biologically theirs." Jack looked at his children, brilliant Maya, who could have been anything but chose to honor her parents, memory through service to others, brave Tommy, who was learning to trust the world again, and gentle Luis, whose heart was big enough to love everyone around him, and felt a satisfaction deeper than any military commendation or Hells Angels Brotherhood had ever provided. The inheritance money sat in trust accounts, growing steadily, and ensuring that all 3 children would have opportunities their biological parents had dreamed of providing. But the real inheritance they'd received couldn't be measured in dollars. It was the knowledge that love could triumph over greed, that courage could overcome fear, and that family meant people who would die before abandoning each other. Outside their living room window, Jack's Harley sat in the driveway next to a minivan that better suited his current transportation needs. Both vehicles represented different aspects of who he'd become: the dangerous man who could protect his family when necessary, and the devoted father who drove carpool and attended school plays. 2 years after the adoption, Jack Morrison stood in his garage on a Saturday morning, teaching his oldest son Tommy the sacred ritual of motorcycle maintenance. The Harley gleamed under fluorescent lights, its chrome polished to mirror brightness, while father and son worked together with the careful attention that serious machinery demanded. "Remember, Tommy, this isn't just about keeping the bike running," Jack explained as he guided his 12-year-old son through the process of checking oil levels and tire pressure. "It's about understanding that some things in life require constant attention and respect." Tommy nodded seriously, his hands steady as he followed his father's instructions. The boy had grown 3 inches in the past year, his shoulders broadening with the promise of the man he would become. More importantly, his eyes had lost the haunted look that had defined his first months with the Morrison family. "When will I be old enough to ride?" Tommy asked, a question that had become a weekly tradition during their garage time. "When you can prove you understand that freedom and responsibility go together," Jack answered. The same response he'd given every week for the past year. "Probably when you're 16, if your grades stay good and you keep making smart choices." The garage walls were decorated with photos that told the story of their family's evolution. Maya at her 8th grade graduation, having skipped 2 more grades and planning to attend MIT's summer program for exceptional students. Luis performing in his first piano recital, wearing a tuxedo that made him look like a miniature concert artist. Tommy accepting the MVP trophy for his little league team, surrounded by teammates who considered him one of the best pitchers in regional youth baseball. Maya appeared in the garage doorway, carrying a letter that had arrived in the morning mail. At 11 years old, she moved with the confidence of someone who'd learned to navigate both childhood and adult responsibilities with equal skill. "Dad, this is from the scholarship committee," she said, holding out an official envelope from the Department of Justice. "They want to interview me for the program that helps children of federal witnesses attend college." Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag before taking the letter. The federal government had established a special scholarship fund for Maya, Tommy, and Luis, recognizing their contribution to national security and ensuring that their education would never be limited by financial constraints. "You nervous about the interview?" Jack asked his daughter. "Not really. Agent Chen has been helping me prepare, and besides, I've already been interviewed by scarier people than college administrators." It was a casual reference to experiences that would have traumatized most adults, delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who'd learned to process extraordinary events as part of normal life. Maya had developed remarkable resilience, but she'd also retained the ability to be surprised by small joys and to find wonder in ordinary experiences. Luis burst into the garage with his characteristic enthusiasm, clutching a handmade Father's Day card that was still damp with glue and glitter. At 9 years old, he'd become the family's emotional barometer, his moods reflecting the overall health of their household relationships. "Dad, look what I made for you." Luis thrust the card into Jack's hands, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mrs. Patterson helped me write it, but I did all the decorations myself." The card's cover showed a drawing of a motorcycle with wings, clearly inspired by Maya's original artwork from their first weeks together. Inside, Luis had written in careful block letters, "Thank you for teaching us that families are made of love. Not just DNA. Happy Father's Day to the best dad in the world." Jack felt his throat tighten as he read the words, remembering the silent, traumatized little boy who'd been afraid to speak when they first met. Now Louise filled their house with laughter, music, and the kind of unconditional affection that healed old wounds without even trying. This is beautiful. Louise, thank you. There's more, Louise announced proudly. I'm going to play a special song for you at dinner tonight. I composed it myself, and it's called My Family. As evening approached, the Morrison family gathered around their dining room table for their weekly family meeting, a tradition that Jack had instituted to ensure open communication and shared decision-making about everything from vacation plans to household rules. Okay, family, Jack said as they finished dessert. What's on the agenda this week? Maya consulted her notebook with the efficiency of someone who'd inherited her father's organizational skills. College planning for me, baseball camp applications for Tommy, and music competition entry for Louise. And summer plans for all of us, Tommy added. Are we really going to take that cross-country motorcycle trip you promised? Jack looked around the table at his children, his actual, legal, permanent family, and felt the kind of contentment that he'd never imagined possible during his years of isolation and self-destruction. His new leather vest hung on a hook by the front door, modified with patches that read Dad instead of his old road name. It represented the transformation from dangerous loner to devoted father, from someone who avoided responsibility to someone who embraced it completely. The Morrison family had been forged through shared danger and mutual protection, but they'd grown into something beautiful through daily choices to love, support, and sacrifice for each other. And every morning, when Jack woke up to the sounds of his children getting ready for school, he remembered that sometimes the best things in life came from the worst circumstances, and that broken people really could create something perfect together.